Sanibel's pretty unique in that we've been able to preserve 70% of the entire island for conservation. And that wouldn't have been possible without the Sanibel plan.
This place is different than any other place in Florida. It's so unique that you don't have the high rises on the beachfront. You don't have every single square foot of land in development, and that 70% of it is in conservation. As we look at every other tourism destination within our state, there is none that I can think of that has a plan like this that allows for 70% of the land in that municipality to be in conservation for perpetuity. And that to me is what makes us as special as we are, and it's what sets us apart from the rest of the country. It's just somewhere that you never want to leave. The island is made up of boutique hotels, boutique restaurants, and boutique stores. We've got 27 miles of bike trails. We've got some of the most pristine beaches in the world. They are as you would have found them if you had discovered Sanibel for the very first time hundreds, thousands of years ago.
All the islands on the coast of the Florida Peninsula, Sanibel is the only island that is actually oriented east and west. So if you stand at the southern bend of the island, you can actually see a sunrise over water and a sunset over water. If you think about it, there's hardly any other place in North America where you can have that. And we are an island composed of seashells. We're known around the world for having lots of seashells, and that's pretty special.
Sanibel is the major chapter in my life. It's where my wife and I raised our kids and had our life. And so Sanibel to me is home. I look at some of the other parts of my life and I think, the Sanibel, no wonder it's home and I love it so much. It's by far the most pleasant, successful part of my life and my wife's life.
On Sanibel particularly, I've proposed to my wife out here. We got married on this island, we honeymooned on this island, and my dad was laid to rest out here. So there's just not one component to the island that's special to me. It's the whole island and the community itself that really just stirs all kinds of emotions when you think back to those memories. It's just a special place. Ian was, in many instances, the perfect storm. It came during a week of king tides, which is the highest tide of the year. It came at the angle that gave us the dirtiest side of it, the worst quadrant of the storm, and it was the slowest moving storm I've ever seen in my lifetime, so 5 to 8 miles an hour.
It's one of those things where you hear about a 10-foot storm surge, but until you actually experience it, you really don't believe it could happen. It happened.
Everything stopped. I was sitting comfortably at my dining room table with my computer, paying bills. And my son walked in and said, "Dad, you're leaving." And we left. The day the rains had started, and we got out before the storm hit. We came back to our house when we could get to the island, and the houses on all sides of us had been destroyed. When I walked in, my computer was still where it was. The notes I was still working with were still there. The bills were still there. Everything outside the house was a disaster. There was so much debris everywhere. The mangrove forest had just broken loose everywhere and was all around, piled up around all the houses. The fact that there were almost no fatalities in the storm is a miracle.
Well, first there was all the mud and everything was gray, literally gray.
There were no bugs at night. It was silent. And then as people came onto the island, chainsaws. That was the sound environment.
And gradually, a lot of your basically weeds came up, the strong plants. And you gradually saw more and more birds. You saw a couple of alligators. You saw the iguanas and a gopher tortoise walking across the road.
Then you started hearing the pounding of nails. and roofs getting repaired, and the sound of the bugs came back.
On the heels of Hurricane Ian, we had no electrical infrastructure on the island, essentially. And it took 6 weeks to get back in our home to be able to run an air conditioner or turn on a light.
The development that was further inland benefited and suffered less damage as a result of our protection of Sanibel's nature.
Sanibel would look very different after Hurricane Ian if the entire island were developed. If 70% of the island weren't in conservation, we would be dealing with a much bigger mess than we're dealing with today. And it also reminds us how important it is to be vigilant and remain resilient through these storm events if we want to continue to be on a barrier island.
Estimates that it's 10% more rainfall and flooding from that storm than it would have been absent climate change.
Hurricane Ian was devastating to the human, built environment here, but from an ecological perspective, it wiped out a lot of those woody species that were invading those interior freshwater wetlands, those wetlands that we worked so hard to preserve from the founding days when the city first incorporated. Without disturbances like hurricanes and fire, those systems don't exist. The island's wildlife have adapted to these natural disturbances over a long period of time. And lo and behold, they started to return to the island almost immediately. But the wildlife bounced back pretty quickly. And I would argue that the residents of Sanibel bounced back pretty quickly too.
Everybody helped everybody. So it was neighbors helping neighbors in a way you just cannot imagine.
We had to pivot a bit and really focus more on trying to help the community get back on its feet, because we recognize that without the community that exists here, you don't have the Sanibel plan.
After the war, we were getting a lot of people moving onto the island. The only access to the island, however, was by ferry boat. So that was somewhat of a limiting factor to people coming on. But it was also part of, I think, the lure and the enticement of the exoticness. I've been coming here all my life. My mother had the first car accident on Sanibel. She drove on a little bridge, and then some busybody came from the other direction and she drove off. The bridge was in '63, the Island Water Association in '68, and once we had that, developers could get all the water for whatever they might want to build. And they just started building tremendously. The county government and the county bankers' establishment saw Sanibel as a cash cow. We resisted that.
Early changes that occurred from mosquito control and the ditching and draining of the island that spurred that rapid development that really got the islanders concerned about the impacts of the natural resources.
They came in and they built big subdivisions where they just destroyed the ecosystem. The locals that remained were about 10% of the population.
That allowed them to garner the support to do the scientific research that would be the basis for the Sanibel plan.
Sanibel resisted. We hired WRT. At that time, it was WMRT. We were attracted by McHarg's book, Design with Nature.
On Sanibel, it was Bill Roberts was partner in charge, headquartered here in Philadelphia. I did all of the ecological zone planning work. We knew that the Sanibel job was going to be an important project.
The Sanibel report was a book or a comprehensive plan of all of these different studies looking at the different facets of the island's natural resources, from the hydrology to the mangroves to the beach system, and of course wildlife and wildlife habitat. That document was really the basis for the Sanibel plan, the comprehensive land use plan that governs Sanibel Island today.
I remember sketching on the plane this notion of ecological zones. That there's this mid-island ridge, there's the Gulf Beach, and those are the two highest points. And between the Gulf Beach Ridge and the Mid-Island Ridge, you have the interior wetlands. And then between the Mid-Island Ridge and the bay, you have the mangroves. So I started thinking about what if we could tie health, safety, and welfare to the ecological zones. That there were ecological zones that had particular characteristics that needed to be adapted to.
It does planning by looking at the various ecosystems on the island and putting, the higher density development in the less sensitive areas. It was landmark at the time when it was adopted in 1976, and today it is still a model for how we should develop on barrier islands.
The protection that we receive from our mangrove forests help, protect my home. I live on the backside of Ding Darling.
Development that was right up against the Gulf, it got devastated. The plan required all the buildings to be set way back from the beach. And that vision, I think, has still carried on now, which is about 50 years.
When we say the plan was a community plan, it was a professionally presented and community policied plan. The pressures have been terrific, and the plan has withstood it, and it has withstood it for a very simple reason. It's what the community wants. The community appreciates that it is a wonderful, unique, outdoor recreational family place to go. They understand that there is a real, genuine, sincere desire to appreciate and protect natural resources. Don't go to Sanibel if you're looking for a big bowling alley and flashing neon lights. That's not what we do.
You think about the Sanibel plan and how progressive and forward-thinking that was 50 years ago. We have time and again, as a small community, kind of had an outsized leadership role around important sustainability issues in Southwest Florida and probably across the country.
You basically have a community taking care of itself without outside interference. That's a peculiar kind of genius, and I believe the desire to preserve that identity is still there.
The big threat to Sanibel, when we first incorporated, were bulldozers. Now our threats are external.
Every month for the last 14 months has been a new record in global heat, and we're certainly not indifferent to that here.
Climate change is going to be a big threat.
We're headed into a reckoning related to sea rise and coastal living. What's going to happen is that there are going to be other hurricanes that are just as devastating as the last one, and even more so.
The frequency of major storm events, we expect that to increase, not decrease.
You can design for hurricanes, but it's really hard to design for the whole sea coming up higher and higher.
And so any plan absolutely must take that into account. The idea that there are functions, health, safety, and welfare functions that the natural environment serves to support human life and human systems. And those should be adapted.
It's important for us as planners to continue to go back to the vision statement, to continue to refer to the hierarchy of our values and making sure that things are done in that order, that we continue to look at sanctuary first. And we'll need to prepare, from a resiliency standpoint, which could involve shoreline improvements, could involve elevating our roadways.
Adaptation without addressing the causes of climate change is a time-limited set of solutions.
We talk about adaptation, but the amount of adaptation that's going to be necessary to sea level rise is huge. And now we're not just talking about Sanibel, it's just bigger. As a society, we're going to have to think differently about property. It's going to be tough.
The whole premise of Sanibel was that this community would thrive economically if it also committed itself to protecting our environment, because our business is tourism.
It's been a year and 7 months, and we only have on Sanibel about 18% of our hotel rooms reopened. And if you combine Sanibel and Captiva, we have about 26% of our hotel rooms reopened. But when you look at a tourism-driven economy, those aren't enough numbers to be able to support the 83% of our restaurants and retailers that are reopened already and our attractions. So it's a matter of getting folks out here.
This could be opportunity for our community, not entirely different from the opportunity the community faced 50 years ago. At that time, the community came together and said, we don't want what the Lee County developers want for our community. We want to forge a different future for ourselves. So from my perspective, there's an opportunity for Sanibel to once again be kind of an outsized leader around these issues and demonstrate what's possible.
We're a small community, so we have to balance a lot of different things at one time. We're in the middle of updating the Sanibel plan right now, and affordable housing and resiliency both are considered our biggest challenges moving forward. The Sanibel plan guides all policy here, and it's important that we keep the plan current and respond to current challenges like climate change and sea level rise.
My great nieces that we're just visiting, when they're my age, it'll be 2082. I'm not sure Sanibel or this will be here then, or will be very likely underwater.
We have grandkids, and we want the world to be in as good a shape as possible for them. In that way, there's an opportunity for Sanibel to come together and say, we recognize that there are challenges that we are facing and will continue to face into the future. How do we want to come together as a community and face this?
While we are an island, we're not truly an island. We're not isolated from the impacts that come from other places. These are natural systems that extend throughout the entire United States, and they're all interconnected. So we all really need to recognize our part in the ecology of the entire country, and that we need to maintain these natural systems for future generations. Otherwise, they'll be lost, and there won't be the support that we have today to protect them.
It's very important that we look out for the wildlife that doesn't have a seat at the table, so to speak. If we believe what we say, if we want to walk the walk, then we need to stick to that principle. And so, that means protecting wildlife habitat for gopher tortoise, for bald eagle, for otter, manatee. And so anytime that we review a plan, hopefully we're upholding the Sanibel plan and what it's about. That's a battle that we have to approach repeatedly.
The planning effort helped solidify that community spirit and focus it into thinking about the future. The 50th anniversary for the formation of the city gives us an opportunity to reflect on the 50 years and the next 50 years.
The community is fiercely protective of the Sanibel plan for the reasons that it's allowed this place to remain kind of a gem.
I do think the Sanibel plan is still a document that has lessons for today.
The natural environment and the economy of Sanibel are inextricably linked. And without one, you don't have the other. So I think it's really important that we continue to support the plan.
And recognize that we have challenges now that were not anticipated originally. And I think there is support for that kind of change.
We also know that we are building this island back in a manner that it will be more resilient than it was when Ian hit.
Working in a small town has been very unique, especially one that's committed to do so much.
Change is a hot button word. The world's scientists are telling us we have the next decade basically to make some pretty significant changes in how we power our economy if we're not going to see some of the more dramatic effects of climate change.
What Hurricane Ian taught us is that less is more. We recognize that anywhere in the world that we live, there is going to be a threat. From what we've experienced here on this island, the resilience and sustainability of the island appears to be viable long-term. We look at sea level rise and storminess as threats. We're not ignorant to that. When you look at the natural resources around us and the way that that feeds your mental and emotional health and well-being, I think that the risk and the rewards, you find that the rewards just outweigh it so much more. The greatest part of our restoration story right now is the fact that the natural components of the island have come back fully. Our water has never looked better, our beaches are fully restored. Everything in the next 6 months is going to be brand new. Between now and then, it's not perfect, but it's still paradise.
Being able to live in a mini paradise where you can walk the beach and see no buildings and no high rises. Protecting that is something we got to do if we're going to keep this gem.
We also have the Sanibel Sea School, which is now part of our education program where we're educating the youth to improve the ocean's future one person at a time. We have a lot of work to do still. We still have a lot of recovery from Hurricane Ian. Our role really is to be able to export the great work that we've done here on the islands to other places so that it can be used as a model so that there'll be other special places throughout Florida and throughout the country. All of us are working in partnership to educate our residents to make sure that they never forget how important and special this island is.
Sanibel is my home. I'm not going anywhere. Oh, I'm home. I'm home. And that's really what I would say. I'm home.
We're going to come back strong. People realize how the nature protected them. The 50th anniversary for the formation of the city gives a chance for everybody to reflect on the city, the vision for the community, the vision for the island.
You can live safely, and you can live the way you want, and you can live with the natural resources and the things you appreciate in nature, whether it's birds or fish or alligators or anything. To be able to do that is an extraordinary privilege.